Traditionally, gravy is made from the fat that runs off from roasted meat mixed with flour to form a kind of roux, and then it's blended with milk. These days, the benchmark gravy for many people is KFC's, which is just plain sad because it's goopy and synthetic. Most people these days have never even tasted what gravy should be. This recipe works great for Thanksgiving turkey, mashed potatoes and gravy, the old Southern favorite breakfast of sausage, biscuits, and gravy. It's a universal gravy solution.
In making this, I'm using a homemade beef stock that I let sit in the refrigerator overnight. It has a layer of fat on top, and I'm actually going to use this fat in preparing the mushroom gravy. So I'm going to separate this off. It's a little bit of the stock gets in with it, don't worry about it. We'd rather have clean stock than clean fat, because this will boil off. So now we've got some fat here, and we've got the stock. Now this is beef stock, but you could do turkey stock if you're doing Thanksgiving or something. It'd be the exact same principle. Nothing else changes. Next, I've got about 120 grams of mushrooms. If you've got really large mushrooms, then cut them up. These are medium small. They're medium size, so these will be fine. We're going to chop them up again later. Also, wild mushrooms, of course, would be even better, but I'm showing you this with simple champignons, which you should be able to get anywhere but in mushrooms. The only other unusual ingredient that I'm going to actually use here is this gyros paprika from Hungary. It's the whole red chilies, a special kind from Hungary. If you don't have this, and you probably don't, you can just use some crushed red pepper flakes. This is really nice. As the pan gets hot here, add some of the fat. Now, if you don't have this, at this point, you probably want to use olive oil. Later, we're going to substitute butter for this, but at this first stage, olive oil is a good substitute if you don't have the beef fat or turkey fat or whatever animal you're using here. Could be lamb, could be anything that works with any meat. Okay. This steam coming off because there was some of the stock was mixed in. That's okay, it won't make any difference. We add the mushrooms and turn the heat up to medium high. Actually fairly high, almost 8 out of 10. And you can begin cooking these. Stir them a little bit to coat them initially with the fat, but don't stir them too much or they won't brown, and that's what you want. So, begin like this for now. After about 3 minutes, you'll get some good color on these, and you transfer them back to the bowl here. And I'm turning the heat off of the pan. There's now no heat on the pan at all. And I'm going to add, at this point you either add butter or you add another tablespoon or so of the beef fat. And just let it sit here like this. Make sure that you coat the bottom. We're trying to deglaze the pan just a little bit with the fat and the stock that's there. But we'll have plenty of opportunity to deglaze this later. We want this to cool down. It's no heat on it at all. Let it sit. While the pan is cooling down, you get the other ingredients together. I've got half a teaspoon of black peppercorns, half a teaspoon of instant coffee, good quality instant coffee. It's one of those secret ingredients to this you wouldn't expect. There's the dried chili, the Hungarian gyros chili, but as I said before, you can use just some crushed red pepper flakes if you don't have this. The shallot, which I'll peel and mince, 1 clove of garlic, which I'll peel and mince, and I've got a little bit of sage, quite a bit of rosemary, and a fair amount of parsley, and I'm going to tie this together in a bunch. You don't need to make a formal bouquet garni out of this, but you're better off if you tie a string around this. It'll be easier to retrieve later. Okay, the pan is cool off by now. You can see there's some fat in there, but not enough for making this roux, so I'm going to add about 22 grams of butter to this, and as the butter melts, we'll scrape it down a little bit more. This will all get deglazed as this cooks slowly. That layer of fond at the bottom is a lot of the depth of the flavor you're going for. This is part of the trick to this. You don't want to burn it. Make sure it's not actually burnt and bitter, but you want that dark fond at the bottom. There's your depth of flavor right there. Okay. And the temperature's down. Don't add the flour when it's too hot, otherwise what will happen is you'll have instantly burnt flour. You need to make sure that the temperature of the pan is down before you add it. So there's the 2 tablespoons of flour. I'm going to stir it in. And now I'm finally going to turn the heat back on the pan just a little bit to start cooking this roux. But this needs to be done slowly and carefully. If you rush it, it won't be good. So I'm turning it on about 4, a little less than medium. It's important during this time to keep scraping the bottom, because we've got a lot of fond in there. In fact, rubber spatula is not really going to work so well. Shift to something with a little bit more cutting power here. You really need to get this up off the bottom here, because it's going to start to burn it. The part that's touching the pan is going to start to burn if you don't get it up off of there as you're making the roux. Also, it's going to be hard to judge the color of the roux this way because you've got all this fond in there. So you just have to go by time. This roux, from the point that I added the flour, needs to cook for about 7 or 8 minutes on a low heat, like I said, about number 4. Okay, it's been about 7 minutes now, and you can tell it's starting to get to the point where it's going to burn next. So I'm adding this chili. I'm also adding, second here, let's stir for about a few seconds. High temperature. Now I'm adding the liquid from the mushrooms that ran off, the shallots that I chopped up, the garlic, and still got the heat on 4. Long enough, I'm going to add the beef stock to this now, or whatever stock you were going to use. So it was about 320 grams of the stock. Now I'm going to add the coffee, the black peppercorns, the herbs, and during this time, just give the mushrooms a coarse chop like this. So just break them up a little bit. That's all they need. And then these go in too. Now we'll keep this at a slow simmer. This is about the level of simmering that you want to see. And after about 15 minutes of this simmering, you're going to remove the herb sprig, and then this is going to get transferred into a blender. And this is the same pan I just cooked that in. All I did is rinse it out with water. As you can see, that there's almost no fond left. It's all been absorbed. Now I put this in, and we'll rub this mixture through the sieve back into the pan. And eventually you get almost all of it through. There's some solids that won't pass, of course. That was the purpose of using the sieve. Now, we add the cream to this as discussed at the front of the video. And begin reducing it again. Medium, low heat. Don't want to rush this. You want it to go nice and slow. Now something to remember is we have no salt in this up till now. I'm adding 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt because you're going to absolutely need that much in order to be able to taste it and to evaluate how it's doing. But close to the end, of course, you're going to adjust it and probably add a little bit more salt. So we're going to bring this up to a slow simmer, during which time the potency of the heat will dissipate some, and you'll concentrate the mushroom flavor. So this is what you want to see, bubbles just breaking the surface like this, nice and slow. You have to be patient with it at this point. Now, after 10 minutes of this, you can just use it like this if you want to, or you can take it to the next step, add a sprig of tarragon in here, stir it around, let it simmer for another couple of minutes, and then you rub it through a china cap or chinois, complete with the tarragon. The tarragon leaf is in here, buried in here somewhere, and this kind of gets mushed in with the gravy as you're rubbing it through the very, very fine mesh sieve.
I'm very pleased to announce the release of Volume 3, The Focus on Food Chemistry. I'm pleased to announce a new, completely different type of cookbook. If you watch my channel regularly, you know that the recipes I present are usually centered on meat or seafood and seldom vegetarian dishes. This new book is a departure from that norm. Only vegetables, fruits, eggs, and dairy are used in dozens of recipes here. The key here is that these recipes don't taste like typical vegetarian food. This isn't a bunch of salads and bean sprouts wrapped in pita bread. These are completely satisfying, hearty dishes that use the science of food chemistry to produce meat-like aromas and flavors. But don't worry, there's no weird chemicals involved, just ordinary foods and spices that you can get in any grocery store. This really is an entirely new approach. These are flavorful, filling meals produced by a distinctive cooking method and unexpected combinations of ingredients. Once you see how it's done and understand the method, you can apply these preparations to some of your own recipes and transform them into vegetarian dishes too. Also look for my cocktail book, Cocktails of the South Pacific and Beyond, Advanced Mixology, available through Amazon online. If you want to know more about my adventures as a chef around the world and have some great laughs along the way, be sure to check out the video tour of my book, 40 Years in One Night. It's up on YouTube right now. Click the link.